think we can talk slight bit more about the hiring process, right? You guys did mention on hiring software engineers, hiring or expanding your team, and compensating them with for example your equity or maybe your future tokens, since maybe you don't have too much cash on hand, right? So can you please talk a little bit about what are kind of the compensation standards for these early employees, as well as what are the differences, right, between how things can be done in Web3 versus Web2?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start practically. You're trying to figure out, okay, one, how do I capture the contributions from, let's say I have a couple of developers in different countries as I'm coming overseas with, let's say, 2 or 3 co-founders. 2, how do I pay them? And then 3, how do I, if they're going to come on payroll, how do I manage that on a global level? So there's different things there. So one, you need like core infrastructure, so you need a bank. Is that Mercury? Is it some of the, is it using Coinbase wallets? I mean, you're trying to find ways just to get money to your service providers, your core contributors who are outside the founding team. So I really do emphasize figure that out. There's things called PEOs, which are professional employer organizations, where when you're ready to actually hire your first employee in the US and do payroll and do benefits, and that's things they're going to look for, and you're going to talk about and say, hey, when we raise, we're going to bring you on full time as an employee with a salary. Until then, which I'll talk about in a second, so you need that. So there's Toku, there's ESI, that's some of the Web3 specific POs. There's the more Web2 and Web3 like Insperity, Escalon, that do different things that will work with Web3 companies that we know of. So that's infrastructure, and at least have those conversations so what do I need to be thinking about, because you're issue spotting, right, as a founder. And then to actually compensate them, look, it's very negotiable, whether it's tokens and or equity. I tend to see both depending on how important that person is. If they're really going to add a lot to developments of the infrastructure, then you're probably going to give them both. And it could be 1, 2, 3% of equity initially. Tokens could be somewhere along those similar lines if they're going to really add value, versus the founding team, where we're talking about the founders may have 30, 25% per founder of the equity, like you're thinking about in that regards. And then tokens, they're obviously going to have 3, 4, 5, 6x more than you're giving to the initial contributors. I mean, Alex, I don't know if you're seeing different things.
No, that's right in line. That's a full answer.
I think with that, I also wanted to just quickly ask, right? What have you commonly seen that Web3 founders do differently from Web2 founders, with in consideration to the fact that they can also use token as a form of compensation?
It really comes down, I mean, in some part to human nature. Most startups in this space have a executive founder and a technical founder. There might be a third, a financial or something else, but that technical founder is very often uninterested in a salary. They may or may not want equity, but for them and their core development team, they're always focused on tokens. Just like our VC crypto firms, they're focused on the tokens. So if you can compensate them with just tokens, you've simplified your payroll structure and you've simplified your cap table. Sometimes the dev team, like Brett said, will hold their equity in an SPV that they each have a portion of to keep things simple. But in Web3, you do have a division between the traditional executive who's tasked with the overall management and directorship of the venture, and then the core dev team that is very often only interested in the token component of the project.
And no, I think you asked about how does this differentiate potentially or similar to Web2 companies or software SaaS companies. It's yes and no. So I think in the ways it's similar, you're going to see, for example, vesting schedules and lockups on both on equity for sure. And then the difference with Web3 is tokens. Typically you see 4 years vesting schedule, 1 year cliff. That's how you protect what you're giving out in terms of equity. If that contributor leaves, does something you don't like, you want to be able to cut the cord quickly, move on, and ideally not lose any of your stock because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, or they don't get their options because they left after 6 months. And it's usually time-based. I see a lot of founders think about milestone-based, which can work, But if the milestones are not clearly defined, you're opening yourselves up for an argument or a dispute.
That's a good point. I mean, the potential for disputes between founders and working teams is quite high in Web3. You have founders who maybe have a longer development incubation period for their project. When we saw the wave of AI hit Silicon Valley, many of our Web3 founders started pivoting their work to either include an AI component or completely into AI. That left their Web3 projects somewhat in limbo. At that point, they started bringing in other team members in order to take the project through to TGE. What happens there is, unlike in a traditional tech space, you do have people at the executive and management level entering into projects sometimes for the first time in Web3. And they may not be suited for it despite their prior experience and the promises that they've made. In hiring in Web3, we pay a lot more attention to exit triggers and for founders to be able to terminate team members aggressively when needed. I would say it's more unusual than a traditional tech company.
I think that's a great response. Anything?
I just say on the more positive side, when the contributing team continues to do what they say they're going to do, it's papered and they're meeting their vesting schedule. Tokens are starting to be outside the vesting, and now they're theirs, no matter when they leave at that point. And let's say they stay for the full 5-year period or 4 years, and they've got all the tokens vested. And then now it's about lockups. When can they start trading? So you build the lockups in so that you're not just having the entire team dump their tokens and crash the price. I mean, those are things that's different than investing. It's different than a 1-year cliff. Those are the things founders should be thinking about. So like, how do we incentivize our team? And we're all working towards this common goal, and then start to trade the tokens, realize liquidity. Because for Web3, I think one of the biggest benefits is you have another way to realize liquidity as a contributor, whether it's a founder, an employee versus just your stock, which is hard to sell as a private company. I mean, you can go find websites and try to sell it, but they want shares, they want Airbnb shares. Right. They want the shares that are pre-IPO. It's hard to sell early stage Series A shares. Now that we have opportunities with investors who want to get in, because we do secondaries, both tokens and equity, but you have both. That's a great thing to sell to your team and then just protect them.
Most projects that we work for, we also give the token project team the right to implement restrictions post TGE. In addition to a 1-year lockup, in addition to vesting on the workers, unless the project is fully decentralized and in the community's hands, the dev team oftentimes in the early years does maintain some level of control and can adjust the market-making activities of the token project. They can put gates, limits on sales by token holders from the insider pool. That's another area of dispute that happens with token comp recipients, where they've passed the lockup period, they've fully vested, but for the sake of the project, there's a centralized command that is limiting them to only a certain number of sales within a certain number of period. Right. Although your legal documents allow you to do that, not every project needs it, but founders should be aware that these tools are available to them for the sake of the project.